Chapter 8, War. In 1917, the United States entered World War I in Europe. The roar of faraway guns brought more changes to Helen Keller's life. Helen had to give up many of her lecture trips. She and teacher were very unhappy over the sad war news. They grieved for the many soldiers who were killed or wounded. Shortly after the war ended, Helen was asked to act in a movie. It would tell the story of her life. "A new adventure will be good for us," Helen said. She still needed more money to take care of herself and Annie and Polly. They traveled to California. The movie work was exciting. In one scene, Helen had to fly in an open plane. It did daring stunts. In another scene, she rode a frisky horse that nearly threw her off. Annie and Polly gave Helen a new nickname. They called her Daredevil Helen. Soon afterward, Helen and Annie were asked to do an act together on the stage. They were to appear in theaters all over the country. They were both nervous the first time the curtain rolled up. The spotlights were bright. Annie came on the stage first and talked about Helen's early life. When Helen came on, the audience always clapped. Helen read Annie's lips and answered questions from the audience. Some of them were foolish. "Do you shut your eyes when you go to sleep?" "I never stayed awake to find out," Helen answered. The act was a success. Helen and Annie earned the money they needed. Now Helen could work again for others. She was happy with news from Washington. Congress had voted for money for many more books for the blind. Some could be played on records. They were called talking books. And here she is acting in the movie, and this must be the horse. And y'all have talking books too. Y'all have, we had cassette tapes and CDs, and now you just have to go to play it on your iPad. The American Foundation for the Blind was an active new group. Helen went to work for the foundation. Helen Keller was famous around the world now. She had met people from every country. She had been invited to visit every president in the White House since her childhood. But darkness was closing in again. Helen's mother had died, and Annie became very ill. But darkness was closing in again. Helen's mother had died, and Annie became very ill. The year was 1936. Annie was 70 years old. Her eyes were worn out with work. She was almost blind, but she had seen Helen succeed. She had seen the new work for the blind beginning all over the country, much of it from Helen and Annie's work. Annie was sick for many months. Long nights, Helen sat beside her. She and Polly nursed Annie tenderly. Helen held teacher's hands when she died. Helen felt as if her own life had ended. They had been together almost 50 years. It was the saddest time of Helen's life. "A light has gone out that can never shine for me again," she said.